Mhm. But German, the COVID things are quite under control in your place, Mr. Peter, or we
I
can
would
see.
say quite yes, but what they fear now is a second wave. Maybe it's a bit exaggerated, but we have increasing figures again, and that is due to the opening, also the opening of Europe. You know, people take their summer leave, go to Italy, go to Spain. Spain has certain areas what they have locked off, and now what was discussed and decided last Saturday is everyone returning with a flight from somewhere has to do a COVID test at the airport from certain areas. So they try to control it. Still, it's, let me say, manageable. It's a few hundreds every day, but we were down to 200-300 new cases per day, and that is up to roughly 1,000 again per day, not compared to, of course, the 60,000 in India, but of course we also have a smaller population.
Mm.
So live streaming started, sir.
Yeah, thank you. We'll start, Mr. Peter Pankaj. Let's comment. Ravi, we'll start. We are not sharp on 6 o'clock now. So, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to another edition of our evening talk, which we have been bringing it to you since the time the lockdown declared. It's become so popular. We have been bringing so many talks, almost 15 to 20 of them in a month. Most of the people are so happy to listen to this live talks from some of the leaders from all over the world, actually. So before I call upon the very, very important speaker we're going to be talking to this evening, let me briefly tell you what's happening in MMA quickly in the next 1 or 2 minutes, so that if you missed it in your inbox, you don't miss this outstanding event which are going to happen. Like tomorrow, we are having an event on innovation to reboot the profits by Rekha Shetty. It's happening. Then on the 13th, along with Conrad Stifting, we are having exclusively event for women where men are also welcome. This we are doing it on the occasion of the Indian Independence Day. The theme is marching ahead, the next normal. I am indeed happy to share with you Mr. Viswanathan Anand, the former world chess champion, Indian chess grandmaster. He has agreed to come and inaugurate and speak to the women for about 20 minutes on the very, very important theme. Then we have 2 sessions advocating for yourself and others. We have got outstanding corporate leaders, Kamini Shah, CFO of Wipro. Then Maria Goretti is author, chef, and television actors, television host in Mumbai. Anu Hassan, you all know many of them, actors, entrepreneurs, motivational speaker. And Ms. Ranjini Manian, who is a champion woman, founder of Global Adjustments Foundation, will be moderating the session. We got another session, very interesting, managing stress in next normal, where Ms. Vani Kola is the founder, managing director of Kalari Capital. She's joining from Bangalore, and Wilfred Albor is a senior partner of global head of Roland Berger and former managing director of Mercedes-Benz is joining this. This session will be in conversation with Shweta Jaishankar. She's a former Femina Miss India International author. So we got some outstanding line of speakers. Please do not miss. It's happening. We are doing jointly with Conrad Stifting. In fact, as I mentioned to you, we already finalized program till about October, all our joint event with Conrad Stifting, and we already shared with you most of them. Please do log in, and if you have missed it by any chance, the live program, not to worry. All our programs are available on YouTube, Facebook, and our own website, and also the audio is available for next 1 year. Then on the 14th, we are launching our new course along with we are doing with again with CAS, Operational Excellence towards Business Excellence. 24 weeks workshop. This masterclass course is starting on 14th. Mr. Balraman, former managing director of Pons and the former first in MMA, will be inaugurating. This is not to be missed event on 17th of August. On Monday, Mr. S. Guru, chartered accountant, columnist, and political economic analyst, and the editor of Tuklat, will be talking to us on another important subject, post-pandemic world and India. This again we are doing with Conrad Stifting, and Mr. Guru, you all know, miles to listen to him, and he's there. Then on the 18th, Tuesday, we have Atul Vora. He is the regional managing director of Solera Holding from Texas, USA. He's going to be talking to us in purposeful leadership. So these are some of the programs which we are lined up for you. And coming today's thing, COVID and the new normal in governance. We got some outstanding speaker today. I think many of you heard him long time ago in MMA, and he is a person I'll introduce a little later. Before I call upon the speaker, let me have the privilege of welcoming all the viewers watching this program live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also live on our audio MMA radio. Now, let me have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Ravichandran Purushottam, President of Madras Management Association, and is also the President of Danfoss Industry Private Limited. Ravi is also the current President for MMA and is from IIM Ahmedabad, and is one person who has been very, very inspired with MMA's activities and the great supporter of MMA. Now, may I request Ravi Purushottam to please deliver the formal welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Ravi. Unmute Ravi, please.
Thank you, Group Captain. Good evening, everybody. It's indeed my privilege to deliver the formal welcome address on this unique online conversation theme, which is today COVID and the new normal in governance. We are doing this event in support together with Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I also think that, the topic is extremely relevant given where we are in the pandemic. I consider it as an honor to welcome this evening Mr. Arun Maira, former member of Planning Commission of India and former India chairman of Boston Consulting Group, and Peter Rimmel, resident representative to India, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, who has been extremely supportive to MMA in all the different programs that we have been co-creating together with Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I also take this opportunity to welcome all the members of MMA across Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry and a large number of participants all over the country. Since there are a lot of large guests today on the platform, let me also briefly tell you something about MMA. We are the largest management association in the country. We've been awarded the best management association in the country for the last 10 years in a row. We've been able to achieve this credentials because of the great work our group captain and his team have been working tirelessly over the last decade. And even in this pandemic, I have to compliment and congratulate the MMA team for completely pivoting the whole programs from being face-to-face to digital. I think MMA actually has demonstrated how to adapt to the new normal. I probably believe that there's never going to be a new normal because, we continue to have new normals almost every other day now. But having said that, I think MMA also makes, management movement across corporate members, students, and public at large. I would also like to acknowledge that, during this pandemic, we have also launched several initiatives. One of the pioneering works that we've got great support from our past president, Mr. Balraman. I think he's created this Ponds Veterans Program, which is, I think, Saturday night for me at least. I've been there in almost all the events. And we have some great leadership speech that has been, going on the last 6-7 weeks now. Today, I think we are here to talk about governance. And I think governance can be defined in a number of ways by management professionals globally. To my mind, the simplest definition for governance is probably the manner in which power is exercised in management of the country's economic and social resources for development. Varieties of entities known generically as governing bodies do govern for a variety of reasons. The most formal is a government, a body whose sole responsibility and authority is to make binding decisions in a given geopolitical system by establishing laws and rules. The talk today is much beyond the aspect of corporate governance, which this audience is so much familiar with. In a national crisis or emergency, be it a military crisis, economic crisis, or a pandemic like what we have been witnessing currently, the accountability of the state in meeting the legitimate expectations and the concerns of public is of paramount importance. While all other social bodies can play a supportive role, it is the government's ability to plan, allocate resources, and identify the appropriate means of delivery, maybe execution as well, which eventually decides the outcome. In a parliamentary system of democracy like we are in India, both the central and state governments have their roles and responsibilities clearly cut out, though there could be certain degree of overlap in some areas. More importantly, the desired outcome would not be feasible unless the center and the state appreciate each other's limitation and work cohesively, for the larger good of the country. Yes, of course, there has been a lot of, gray areas that have actually thrown up while managing lives and livelihoods. We have seen that both at, particularly in handling the migrant labor crisis. But largely, I think the entire nation has witnessed a great degree of alignment between the center and state in sharing useful information and battling the pandemic together, especially particularly in the healthcare domain. There have always been some great examples in interstate collaboration in dealing with the crisis. In this temporary phenomenon, or is this a temporary phenomenon, or is it a new normal in governance? Of course, there is a federal structure that we live in, but going beyond the pandemic and what constitutes good governance? How does a democracy like ours, with multiple societal dimensions of religion, caste, language, political ideologies, measure up to global governance standards? At the end of 7 decades after independence, where do we stand today and what is the road ahead? It would really be fascinating to hear all these, here today on all these from our distinguished chief guest this evening, Mr. Arun Maira, a global thought leader who has witnessed the game of governance from very close quarters as a former member of the Planning Commission. So we are all very eager to listen to your thought-provoking address. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Peter Rimmel for joining us this evening from Deutschland. And I think, he's been very supportive of several activities that MMA has been putting together. I would also like to welcome the past presidents of MMA, my colleagues from the management committee, members of MMA, distinguished invitees, student members, viewers from all over the globe watching this program live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and of course, MMA Live. Wish you all a very exciting evening, and I will hand it back to Group Captain.
Thank you, Ravi, for thing, and thanks to Conrad Stifting, particularly to Pankaj for choosing MMA to host this event this evening, because we have been able to bring in some outstanding talks under different, be it leaders speak under political system, parliamentary system. So all we could do that thanks to the head of programs from Conrad Stifting Delhi. Now, we also have Mr. Peter Rimmel, who joined us from Germany. Let me have the privilege of introducing Peter Rimmel before I request him to come and deliver the formal introductory remarks. Peter Rimmel is the currently the resident representative of Conrad Stifting to India. He has a first law degree from Freiburg University. After working as a jurist, judge, and lecturer, he took public office, head of a division of the State Ministry of Interior in Saxon, Germany, and from November 1991 until 2000. And he was also the advisor for the governor's reform of GIZ, which is called German International Cooperation, to the Ministry of Administrative Reforms and Anti-Corruption Commission of the Republic of Indonesia, where he served for so many years. And he then moved to Rawada, also as a principal advisor to the Good Governance Justice Program. Earlier, he was also the resident representative of Lebanon, director of Rule of Law Program, Middle East and North Africa, and Conrad Stifting. It's indeed a privilege to have Mr. Rimmel. May I request you to please deliver the introductory remarks. Over to you, Mr. Peter Rimmel.
Yes, thank you, Group Captain. Dear Mr. Ravi, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to open my remarks by extending a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Mr. Arun Maira, whose reputation precedes him. We are honored to have you here today with us, and I'm very much looking forward to your remarks. Around the world, the corona crisis has changed civil services. In one sense, it has made them change along similar lines as our service economies, which have had to embrace digitization and alternative workplace regulations. But the pandemic has also given civil services and government structures on all levels unprecedented powers. Perhaps the most important change has been the shift towards home office. Wherever this is technically feasible, it has been introduced. Germany, well, it had acquired a kind of dubious reputation of being overly cautious when it comes to innovation, but COVID-19 has forced our hand in this regard, and for some, surprisingly, so the new solutions have proven effective. All levels of government have introduced new work regulations along those lines. The federal government is entirely in home office mode, while the foreign ministry works shift-wise. So what I have said about government is, of course, also true for private enterprises as far as possible. Even to the surprise of many institutions, home office has worked out more effective than they would have expected. Being a federal republic, of course, you have a variety of what states, what cities are trying. Some are more innovative and even say it, like a city, Ulm in the south, is doing experiments through a blog, highlighting the fact that they are treating an uncharted territory here. Other ones, as said, are more traditional. And what has been unthinkable long time in Germany is, as a part of e-governance, that you have, can you apply for something, tax returns, retirement money, even unemployment benefits. Maybe unemployment benefits is something not so common in India yet, but to administer it, many of those services have now been digitized, and that will for sure last. And in this point, I'm sure India was way ahead of Germany in introducing e-government. As a participant in one of our webcasts put it some while ago, if radical change is effected long enough, it becomes permanent. It becomes our new normal. But there is also another side to that. The corona crisis heralds the return of the forceful state. Coercive force is, if it not the foundation of the modern state, especially in Germany, but also in the wider Western world. We have tried to unravel this connection and to hide the state's coercive qualities. Over the past 50 years or so, the police, for example, has changed from a violent instrument to uphold order by force into a civil service to provide safety, security, and the rule of law for everybody. And I have witnessed this development myself, not only the experience from the street. I was a police officer and in police many years, but also up to the police department in the Ministry of Interior, not only, as I said, witnessing, but being part of shaping these changes. Now, our civil service has once again been endowed with the task of surveillance and enforcing conformity for the sake of our health rather than our security. In Germany, the specifics of this vary from state to state, as those policing duties fall into the responsibility of the federal states, a situation Indians are undoubtedly well acquainted with. And so you find different nuances, Bavaria being very tough on it, Berlin being more reluctant. And just 2 weeks ago, the city of Berlin saw a 10,000 strong march against anti-COVID policies. The crowd disregarded every regulation, from social distancing to wearing masks in private to the showing of Nazi symbols even. All that while being extremely aggressive towards the police, journalists, and bystanders who were threatened and agitated against for wearing breathing masks. So when the police finally ordered the dispersal of the demonstration on the ground, that public security could no longer be guaranteed, this was not heeded. It brought a debate into Germany with a very difficult topic. So the powers of the state in contrast to the responsibility of the individual. I could also reformulate that and say, is our health and safety a greater good than our freedom of expression? I only raised the question. I'm not having a clear answer for that. Undoubtedly, the corona crisis has forced the state to make deep intrusions into civil life, be it in India, in Germany, in any other country. But the measures have so far been carried by majority support. The German government, for example, has been at pains to be strong, but not an enforcer. So Chancellor Merkel had been at pains to explain that ours was not a curfew and not a lockdown, but it was rather contact restrictions. So different wording, maybe the effect was the same. The German government is willing to do what is necessary, but unwilling to do what might be useful but excessive. So believing in the responsibility of people becomes problematic if the irresponsibility of some threatens the hard-fought gains of the majority. Multiple states have now reacted to the lax adherence to rules an open flaunting of advice, and made the police enforce more hurtful fines against not wearing masks, for example, on public transport. But the debate has only just begun and will very well stay with us throughout the coming years. So I'm coming back to the topic. Is it the new normal? To combat the crisis, government is expanding and taking over responsibility. It does not usually possess in liberal democracies. Civil service prospers under the pandemic. And while this is probably our best and only answer in the current situation and in the current crisis, we should always remain vigilant. Because what is true for the very, very advantage of this pandemic might also be even more true for its many repercussions. Maybe two remarks on India. I recently talked with an Indian bureaucrat, and he said the bureaucracy has returned to some powers it had lost due to different reforms, and that they have regained control over certain items. I just put that as a statement. And maybe an observation more of my own. Yes, crises are the hour of the executive, but the parliament has a role to play. And if parliaments are not having a session since long, this raises for me in a parliamentary democracy questions of governance, of a defunct parliamentarian system. And I think that's something what needs to be addressed, because coming back to the original one, if radical change is effected long enough, it becomes permanent. It might become our new normal. And for some of those things I described, I hope it will not become the new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking forward to the remarks by our esteemed guest and thought-provoking debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Remmel, for sharing the German perspective on the theme. Set that context, and it's indeed my proud privilege to introduce our distinguished chief guest for this evening. Mr. Arun Maira is a management consultant and a former member of the Planning Commission of India. He's also a former Indian chairman of Boston Consulting Group. Arun Maira was born in Lahore. He received his degree from MSc and BSc in physics and St. Stephen College, Delhi University. Arun Maira was a part of the Tata Administrative Service over 25 years and worked at various important positions in Tata Group till 1989. He was the first non-Bhumiputra CEO of Malaysia, where he worked for Tata Industries from 1977 and 1979. He was a board member of the Tata Motors from 1981 to 1989. He was also the resident director from 1981 to 86 and the executive director of corporate office in 1987 to 89. He played a very key role, part of the Tata Motors' successful entry in the LCV segment. After this, he worked with Arthur D. Little for 10 years, where he was a leader of global organization practice and a managing director of Innovation Associates and subsidiary of Arthur D. Little. In 2000, Arun Maira returned to India and had held the position of chairman of Boston Consulting Group, India, till about 2008. It is my proud privilege to present to you Mr. Arun Maira. We're going to be talking to another very exciting topic, COVID and the new normal in governance. Over to you, Mr. Arun Maira.
Thank you very much, Group Captain Dr. Peter Remmel. It's such a privilege to be in a platform which you are supporting, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. It's such a prestigious, thoughtful organization, and the world needs good thought nowadays. I have known the MMA, the Madras Management Association, 15 years ago, when I, with Boston Consulting Group, was invited by Mr. Gopalakrishnan, who was the president of the IMA at the time, to look at IMA and the management movement in India and to see how it could be improved. So we looked at all the management associations in the country, and the star was the MMA. So it's a privilege to be here, to be invited to speak to your members and your friends. Thank you so much. The subject today is creation of a new normal in governance. The word is governance and not government. And the COVID crisis is compelling us to think of the need for better governance. What's happened with COVID crisis? We were in India for the last 15, 20 years, traveling along happily growing, the fastest growing free market democracy in the world, we kept saying, our growth rates were just short of China's, but ahead of all other large countries of the world. There were many of us within this bus of growth. We had safety belts inside the bus. Bus was moving faster, sometimes slower, sometimes, but moving well, this big bus. And we inside were doing well. And as I said, inside the bus, we were even beginning to be served French wine and Swiss cheese, enjoying the ride. And then the bus had to suddenly stop. COVID came and the economic bus had to suddenly stop. And we were surprised inside the bus to see falling off the bus onto the streets around us, the people who'd been clinging on to the bus, riding on the roof of the bus in the open, in the sun and rain, clinging on to this bus of economic growth. We weren't even aware of them. We were celebrating the good ride and the comfort of the growth of our economy. What we were inside the bus looking at, and the people in the government driving the bus looking at, were two instruments on the panel, control panel. One of them was the GDP meter. We wanted it to keep rising. $1 trillion, $2 trillion. Come on, press the accelerator, make it $5 trillion. And the other instrument that some of us looked at was what I call the RPM meter, the stock market meter, which showed us how the stock market was going up and down as we press the accelerator, like an RPM meter does, for us to make judgments about what to do with the money that we could invest, stock market investments. And using these two, how well the stock market is doing and the GDP is doing, we were thinking that we understood how everyone was doing. Maybe it was some indication about how the people in the bus were doing, but not the large majority of our country who were not in this bus. They were clinging onto the bus, and they fell off when the economic growth stopped. When I was in the Planning Commission as a member, we invited organizations, think tanks around the world to help us consider how well India was doing with respect to not just the economic growth, but also with respect to the environment, the care of the environment, as well as the inclusion of the billion people of India in the economic growth. And very scientifically, this framework called the SEDA framework, the Sustainable Economic Development Framework, Assessment Framework, pointed out to us that India was doing the worst of all the countries in the world. For every unit of growth, we were destroying the environment more, and we were creating less jobs and growth of incomes than even Nepal and Bangladesh, and certainly much less than many of the other countries that we like to compare ourselves with. So we have to rethink how we are governing our social and economic systems in India. But it's not just India. The Sustainable Development Goals have shown the whole world a few years ago, when people looked deeply into not just the economic growth numbers, but to the condition of the environment and to the condition of all people in societies, that we need to pay attention to, they pointed out, 17 instruments, not just the GDP instrument or the stock market instrument, 17 instruments. It's very difficult to pay attention to 17 instruments at one time. And this is the challenge that we have of global governance today. The COVID crisis has also shown us what's wrong with our present government and expert-led models of improving systems. We are at this moment paying a lot of attention, as we need to prevent the medical problem from becoming worse and finding solutions to the medical problem. One of which, of course, is social distancing, or physical distancing rather, to prevent the spread of the pandemic. And that's the best solution, the right solution that our doctors have pointed out to us. The consequences of this very sharp, good, firmly implemented solution in countries has been that other systems have been breaking down, and people while being prevented from dying from COVID, are in our country dying due to other illnesses for which they cannot get treatment since all the resources are diverted towards the care of people infected with COVID. And by the stoppage of the economy in our country, people are even beginning to die out of starvation because they don't have incomes to buy the food. So, solutions must look at all aspects of a system. Secondly, you must also look at the future consequences of sharp actions today. Reducing the prevention of spread of the disease is causing schools to be shut down. And the last 1 week, all over the world, there's big alarm about the effect of interrupting children's education is going to have on their lives in the future. So crisis solutions for crisis in one part of the system can damage other parts of the system, can also damage the future health of the whole system. And this is the challenge we have in management. We are used to managing by focusing and dealing with the problem very efficiently, but we need to unfocus. We need to look at many things together. We don't know, as humanity at the moment, how to govern complex systems. Einstein, you remember, said very famously that when one is confronted with in crisis an insoluble big problem, to continue to try to solve it by pressing harder on the methods with the methods that one has used so far, the very methods which might have caused the problem, is madness. So which is why, once again, I would say, when we're thinking about what we need in the future, let's not keep thinking of just government. We have to think of governance. What we are seeing now, the evidence of, is the clash of the scientific way of thinking and the natural way of being. We've been seeing this for the last 30 years, more and more, how we are destroying the environment, how we are destroying the way nature has of looking after itself, as we are imposing onto it our scientific solutions. Science is a way of thinking, nature is a way of being. Scientific thinking breaks reality into parts. Nature brings things together to create life. The European Enlightenment, the first Enlightenment in the 17th century, broke knowledge into parts, into silos. Specialized disciplines in which one got to know more and more about less and less. Within physics, a broad discipline in Newton's time, we've now gone into, 30, 40 specializations within physics itself. And then you have biology and chemistry, each broken up into parts. And the social sciences within economics, there's so many schools, and there's so many other social sciences. So we're getting better and better at knowing more and more about less and less. To use the expression of Rabindranath Tagore, a poet and a philosopher who was the first Indian to win the Nobel Prize, he said, we could be breaking up the world into fragments by narrow domestic walls. We are seeing this not just in the walls that are coming up between people in societies, but also for many, many centuries now, 2 centuries, the walls that have been coming up between scientific disciplines. We are breaking up the world into fragments by these many narrow domestic walls in our thinking and in our actions. Nature brings people and things together and thus creates life. We need a new enlightenment because we are suffering from not just a COVID crisis, but we have been suffering, we realized, from an ecological crisis, and we did not realize that we have been suffering from what I've just described as a civilizational crisis. We need to come to what Tagore also said, a situation where the clear stream of reason flows and it is not lost in the dreary desert sands of dead habits of thought. Scientific management of nature One of the first well-known examples of this, which produced great results, was the introduction of scientific management of forestry, which was actually in Germany, where trees were planted in equal distances, in rows of equal distances, and the same trees, because then you knew how much of that resource there was, and you could apply scientific methods to improving that particular type of tree. You could count them easily by walking in them. So we introduced methods of management and improving productivity, management methods of improving productivity into nature. And as we were talking earlier before we began this discussion with Dr. Peter, that nature's forests survive because they have a variety in them. Different types of trees, different types of bushes, different types of grasses. They work together and sustain the whole forest, like the Amazon forest. The Amazon forest is not managed by scientific ways of man. It is managed by the real, natural, scientific ways of nature. Scientific agriculture. Plant one type of crop in a big field, and then you can use machines to improve productivity and appropriate fertilizers and pesticides for that crop. But as we've learned in our own country, wheat, paddy, uniform crops, we are destroying the soil underneath. We are changing even the climate, local climates in parts of our country. So this scientific approach about doing the same thing in a large scale with standardization is killing the beauty of complex systems and the way they sustain themselves. Scientific population management, which is take the best man and the best woman and let them co-create and take the children they produce and put them into special nurseries where they're fed the best food, and they will grow into, well, superior men, superior women. So this method of spreading what you consider the best and forgetting the rest, this scientific approach is killing civilization and is killing nature too. We have to change the paradigm, friends. We have to change from the machine way of organizing, which is overpowering nature, to nature's way of organizing itself, and apply nature's way to the way we organize our own society. We have to change from man's way of thinking, which has been overpowering women's way of thinking for centuries now. We have to change from trying to impose the formal machine-like management systems to overpower the organic, informal systems with which people create their livelihoods and manage their own communities. This is a crisis we have in India right now, where we are all denigrating the large informal sector that we have. We stigmatize it, we look down upon it, but that sector has in it great resilience. People with very little resource and very little support from the formal system sustain themselves. So think again. Globalization. Before COVID even, globalization was breaking up. There was a reaction from countries to the global systems of trade management, saying that people within their countries were losing jobs. Their incomes were being destroyed for the benefit of allowing trade of goods and money to flow around the world. Of course, more recently, geopolitical tensions have been breaking up the global order. And in COVID, the physical realities have broken down the flows of products around the global supply chains. And this is not going to change in a hurry. We have to stop now and think more of the local rather than global solutions. And this is the realization that we are coming to in the world today, that for these complex problems of inequity, of social systems destruction, of soil destruction, forest destruction, water contamination, we can't have solutions for water which apply in the same way across the world, the solution for forests which apply in the same way across the world. All these systems come together locally and they create their local reality. So if we have to solve and improve on all the indicators of the SDGs, then the people of Kerala must find their solutions for society and the environment, and even for health systems, as they are doing. And the people of Tamil Nadu, their own. Certainly the people in Nagaland would have a different situation with respect to the environment and their social situation. So the situation of Kerala cannot be their solutions, nor can those be the solutions for Himachal Pradesh or the desert lands in the Thar Desert. So it comes to, again, our approach to managing large complex systems, and therefore strong central governments, we can object to them on ethical grounds, that they take the power away from the people, but we must also object to them, I would say, on scientific grounds. They are not the solution to the complex problems that the world has not found the right solutions to for so far. We need local system solutions developed and implemented by communities to these global systemic problems of health, livelihoods, and the care of the environment, which are coming together very rapidly and fiercely now. We must change the theory of change. We should not be looking to scale up a standard solution everywhere, but we should scale up the ability of people everywhere to find their own solutions in their own communities. This was, my friends in India, Gandhiji's way of giving freedom to the people, to make people the masters of their own lives, their own communities, and their own solutions. So here we are, the people in the bus, and there are many people outside the bus. We inside the bus, many of us were part of and the beneficiaries of the globalization, in which those who had capital could invest their capital wherever they wanted to in the world and increase their own returns on that capital further. And thus, by this system of the free flow of capital, the freedom for migrant capital, the wealth of those who had wealth has been increasing faster and faster, and therefore the distance between those who own wealth and have wealth from those who only can work and get their income from work, has increased so high in the last 30 years. And we don't need to talk about those statistics anymore. When you come to saying that just probably 50 people in the world today own as much wealth as half of humanity. This is unsustainable. It is unethical and it is unsustainable. So as I said again, globalization has been making life easier for migrant capital to go wherever it liked, to tell countries to say, here's the rules for us. Let us come, let us do business, make it easy for us. And we've been making it very hard for migrant workers who cannot even find a home anywhere. We need new forms of business enterprises. I'm talking now to you, us as management and managers, in which workers will create the wealth for themselves and not by their work, create wealth only for remote investors, who many of them don't even know what their wealth is being invested in. It's just a stock market ticker. And whether people work there or not is not of much concern to them. And here's where I come to Gandhiji again. His charkha, spinning wheel, was a symbol. It was a vision of enterprises by the people, their own enterprises, producing things for the people, and they were owned by the people. They were enterprises of the people too. So we do need democracy, deep democracy, which is government by the people, of the people, for the people, but by the people. And we need enterprises, democratic enterprises, which are enterprises of the people, and by the people, and for the people too. So we have a conceptual crisis in how to govern complex dynamic social systems. Again, quoting Einstein, we can't keep applying the same institutional ideas and hope to solve these civilizational and ecological problems that we don't know how to solve today, and in fact are creating more problems by keeping on applying our present ways of getting things done. We need to rethink how we manage and govern both business enterprises as well as cities and countries. So let me summarize now in 5 points. First, as managers, we know that what we measure is what we manage. Firstly, boards of companies have been keeping their eye too much on profits and shareholder value, the two indicators in the board. They need to be putting more indicators in governance for assessing the impact of their businesses on all stakeholders and on the environment, and look at them every day, just like they look at the profit every day and every month, and the share price every day and every month. And governments also need to keep their eye not just on GDP, but on the well-being of all citizens, as well as the well-being of the nature that sustains us all. They need to have many indicators on the scorecard in front. So this whole persistence to say we are going to become a $5 trillion economy. When we became a $2 trillion economy, we have damaged our environment and our society enough. Let us just pause before we press that accelerator, get the instrument panel, the right one, and then choose which way we want to steer. Systems thinking requires us to unfocus, to see the whole forest, and not to just count the trees, separate to count them. We have to see the relationships in many things. So that's the second thing. First is broaden what we measure. Second is unfocus and think of systems and relationships between the parts of systems. The third is we must listen to people who are not like us. We just listen more and more to people who talk our language, who think like us. We are in our webinars with them, in seminars with them. On social media, we're compelled to be with them, people we like. The algorithms force us to be with them. We are not listening, as I said, in science even, to people who don't have the same science as us. And certainly in our society in India, like I pointed out by the bus, we weren't even listening to, we weren't even sensing that there were people who weren't living life like us, to whom our indicators of the stock market or of the GDP or whatever else we thought important was perhaps of no consequence to them. Let's go out of the bus. Let's be with them and listen to them. Fourth, I mentioned already, change, our theory of change. Change must be more bottom up and not top down. And the fifth is again Gandhiji's principle of Anantodaya, which is think of the poorest person first and maybe only when you're devising new governance and policy solutions. What effect would your policy have on that person's life? People are not numbers. And economists put people into their equations as numbers. People are human beings. Poor people are not a burden to be tolerated by us, the elite. They are human beings. They have agency. And they are the source of energy and solutions that the world needs. So friends, these are my 5 requests to us for changing our fundamental ways of thinking to create what we are hoping to have is a new normal in governance. It's going to be very different to what we've considered as normal ways of managing and government so far. So thank you for patiently listening to me so far. And if you have any questions to challenge me, I would love to take those questions and learn some more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Shankar? Yes, sorry. I think we got... thank you so much, sir. It's been a great insight on the theme. And we have got more than 1,400 viewers watching this program live on YouTube, Facebook, and other portals where we are taking it live, including audio stream live. And now I'll request maybe Peter Rimmel, you have any questions? And also Pankaj, followed by that. We have got a lot of questions which has come up. And in the meanwhile, those who are on the chat box, please put your question in the chat box. So we'll be more than happy, delighted to, we'll be to share this question with the speaker, he'll be more than happy to answer your question. Over to you, Mr. Peter Limbel.
Okay, I would have two questions or comments. The one is, Mr. Maira, you said don't only look at the bottom line for profit or loss, look for other things too. Would you think it's useful to include some instrument like the so-called triple bottom line, what looks at different costs into a formal system of accounting, that the other changes can be incorporated? The first one. Second, you said more local, less global. You didn't say local instead of global, of course, because like global things like global heating and whatever you cannot address only on a global level, but it needs to be there. So what could be the idea of incorporating this power, what you mentioned on the local level, where people have a feeling of belonging, that they want to preserve the environment, to upgrade that somehow that it can contribute to global solutions? So those two questions I would raise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's so profound. I couldn't expect less from you. The first, let me take the second one first, which is local or global. This is one thing we have to change in our way of thinking. We tend to think about propositions as either or propositions. We got to learn about both and. In a system, both must exist. If you had only the local, the system wouldn't be healthy. If you had only the global, the system wouldn't be healthy. The global and the local must learn to coexist and respect each other. Which brings me to something Mr. Ravi said when he introduced the subject, and it's very profound what you said, that governance is the manner in which power is exercised, and that is it. Too much of the power has been held by some people only, and they've got a way of thinking, and they exercise that power maybe without meaning to, in ways which continue to perpetuate their way of thinking, and that is what then prevails. And we have to now say, look, open up your mind and think of other things too. Which brings me to your second question, your first question it was about the triple bottom line. This is not a new thing. I was a director of the board of the UN Global Compact way back in 2000 and 2002. And that was all global leaders of businesses deciding how they would change the way business works so that business would pay then, at that time, attention to the Millennium Development Goals, which we didn't do enough, and we got to the SDGs. And what did we realize? That we have got all the instruments. There was a GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, for example. The triple bottom line had been around even longer. And there were others, there are many such. But why are they not adopted? Why are they not adopted? So this is the question to examine, and we have been since then. That there's a matter again of power, as you said. And so we talk again to say that the people who are using the present set of instruments by which they are succeeding and are being recognized by their peers as the best, they want to be recognized by their peers as the best. They really are not at this moment concerned about being recognized by the poor people of the world. They assemble in Davos on the mountaintop and be celebrated by their peers. Yes, and I want to be invited there and to have my clapping and appreciation there. Would I come down to the seaside and let the poor people say, you're full of shit? I don't want to. I want to be appreciated, right? And so this is where we got to open up. I said about listening. I have to allow, it's a personal thing, for my pride to be shaken by the reality of the people for whose lives I say my business exists, which I don't do actually. So this is my thought again, that the business community and here the Madras Management Association must get its own members together to ask this question of themselves. Why is it that we are not adopting, as you said, all these frameworks? Please look, let me ask how many members of the MMA adopt these instruments. And by adoption, I don't mean that at the end of the annual report, they will say that we've reported this, because I've read those annual reports. And I say in your everyday actions, you're not consistent with what you're saying at the end of the report. I want you in your board, every board meeting, to start the board meeting by saying, what effect did our work have in the last month on the poorest people of this country? Are we even finding the indicators of that? And don't start with say, let's see what's happened to the profit in the last month or the cash flow in the last month. I mean, have them side by side. It's not an either or, but please see them together. Thank you.
May I do it? Captain, may I ask? Am I audible?
Mr. Pankaj, you're audible. I think there's some problem with the group cam. Vijay, you please go ahead.
It's pretty local to me, but I'm clear now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mera sir,
Please.
all the questions profound, but I found your talk very profound. And sometimes I ask myself more than ask you, are you advocating going back to nature? Or are you sort of asking us to declutter our mind from the perspective of having this binary of either money or no money? Money should be generated, but it should not be lopsided in terms of distribution. Do you have a good example of the points that you advocate, those last 5 points in existing practical life?
Surely. Your profound question, am I saying going back to nature? I'm not meaning that we sort of all disappear as human beings with our aspirations and leave it to nature. I'm saying that we as human beings have been created by nature, and we've been given a gift by nature as being perhaps the most evolved of the creatures on earth, and maybe others elsewhere in the universe on earth, that we think of the future. We want to create systems to make the future better. Okay, we invent management, we invent systems of governance, we invent institutions. So I'm asking us that in the institutions that we are inventing, please don't try to overpower nature with them. Exploit nature to make more wealth for ourselves and our own organizations. Remember, we are a part of nature, and to be a part of something and respecting it and realizing that if you kill what you're a part of, you will die also. This is the wisdom we have to come to. But yes, we must invent the new normal in governance, keeping this ethic and this wisdom in mind. Okay. Now, to your question about examples, we're talking about a circular economy a lot, and it's been talked about in the context of the environment, that the circulation of material and energy must be watched in the whole circle. It's not that you use something in your factory or in your industry and then discard what is wasted outside to be out of your sight. And in this system of thinking, of managing, of getting a resource, converting it, and whatever is wasted, discarding it, the whole ecology of the world has got damaged. We are dumping plastics out of sight in the oceans, and now realizing that in the oceans, the plankton and the fish are dying, and if they die, there are many consequences back on land even for our lives also. So in the circular economy, we are asking ourselves to keep tracing the material and energy that flows through the system. Don't lose sight of it. I'm pointing out, use the same model of circularity in the wealth economy. Okay, so we have, presently, the wealth is being generated by activities of people on the ground. I mean, they work, they do things, they convert things. So they are generating, with their work, some wealth. The wealth that is created after they've been paid their money, their income, their salary, is trickled upwards, is taken upwards to the investors. And this wealth has been accumulating more and more in certain pockets. Wealth funds, very wealthy people, the people who own the small percentage perhaps, but shares in very large wealthy corporations, right? So that wealth is not circulating back fast enough. They do give back some through philanthropy, but it's a very, very small fraction of the wealth that goes up. In CSR, which is another way of saying let the shareholders give back some, we say 2% of your profits. Now, 2% of the profit may be at best 10% of your income, is 0.2% of the income. The income was what was the use of the resources. The people, their energy, their work, the materials used, that constitutes your P&L account. That is the 100. But you're taking 0.2 and say, give it back. It's a very small trickle down. Okay? We say to the people on the top, please pay some taxes. And they say, no, no, no. If you tax us, because taxing is the normal social way of getting the money to circulate so the taxes can be used for providing healthcare and education for the people who can't afford to pay privately for it, keeping the society healthy together. Say, no, no, if you tax us, then we have no incentive to make even more money. And so please let us make even more money so that there'll be benefit to the rest of the people. And I'm saying, but the trickle down is so slow that the accumulation up there is going larger and larger, and it's not trickling down and watering the health of the people below. So change the design and come back to Gandhiji again, but more than that, the cooperative ideas where the workers have a share in the wealth created by the enterprise, as well as a share in how the enterprise is run. And Germany is a good example here. Certainly in workers having a share in the say in the decisions. They require that. There are works councils. They require that on the boards of large companies, you will have worker representatives. Maybe they don't share through the shares of the company, but they certainly share in the way the company is managed. Whereas the corporate idea goes even further and says, let the people also be the owners of what they do. And in India, we have examples. We've got many. I mean, Amul is a great one. Seva, all the enterprises are same. The Grameen Bank has proven this in Bangladesh and the similar ideas in India. So we do have examples of such enterprises in which the wealth is created at the bottom of the pyramid also, and is not just accumulating at the top.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Pankaj, anything else? Sorry, sir, I think I had to log out. I think I got jammed and I had to log out and come again. The number of questions come. All those viewers who have put their question in chat box, I think I missed out because I logged out and logged in. We'll try and retrieve it. Yes. Now, there are the question which has come from the YouTube viewer. There are 3 questions. What he's asking is, what governance initiative you suggest to make India an economic powerhouse? How long do you give the country to reach there? And how better can we use technology to this end?
First one is make India an economic powerhouse. Second is
how long do you give the country to reach there?
Yes.
And third one is, how better can we use technology to this end?
Okay. I'll answer the second one first. How long does it take to reach somewhere? Is say sometime T. But T starts from when you start the new method of getting there. Okay, so if you keep staying with the old method or not having the courage to take the new method, I'm going to keep adding that on from now. So how long it's going to take to get there is going to be all this time about debating whether or whether not we should use the new method plus the T. The T is going to be inevitable. To change a complex system with everything working together is going to take some time. It's not going to be instantaneous. Let's say it's 3 years or 5 years. But if for the next 2-3 years we keep persisting with the old methods of thinking how we're going to solve this problem, we are pushing away further how long it's going to take to come into the better world. Plus, during these 3 years, we'll be continue to cause further damage. And so it'll take us even longer to recover and to create the better world. So the sooner we switch off the old methods and switch on the new ones, Einstein's whole instruction to us, the less time we are going to take. What is the solution for India to become an economic powerhouse? As I said, we cannot be a $5 trillion economy and claim that we are an economic powerhouse. Just being an economic powerhouse is not enough. We've got to be a great society, a great nation. And the economic side of our nation, the measurement of the size of the economy, is only one side of the nation. We as a nation have chosen August 15th, 1947, a constitution which was then formed in 51, but with certain declarations of our tryst with destiny, that we are going to be a country where every last Indian will have all freedoms, not just the political freedom, but will have societal freedom, means no caste system, no denigration of people because of their histories, their colors, and their religions. And we will have full economic freedom to people, means everyone has an opportunity to produce incomes for themselves. On this last one, which is related to the economy, we've done very badly. Our method of growth has not created respectful ways for people to grow their own incomes. We look down on small enterprises. We keep saying the problem with India is there's too many small enterprises. We need some very big companies. Then we'll become an economic powerhouse. So you just examine your way of thinking. We need those small companies, the small enterprises, because those are the enterprises of the people, where people with little capital, and we don't have much capital in this country, and their skills and their efforts create wealth, and they add to the economic growth of our country. So get down to that. We must start to build more industry in India. Things made by Indians, for Indians, to world class. We must, all Indians, enjoy world-class products, and we will then be able to export those products around the world. I had the privilege of working with Tata Motors for many years. We were, in the dark days of India, as people called them before 91, producing trucks and buses, which we were exporting around the world in competition with our teachers, Daimler-Benz of Germany. Respectfully, to say we have learned something and thank you for teaching us, but we are doing it and we are giving the Indians the best trucks for Indian conditions. And therefore, when anybody else came from outside with so-called better technology to sell in India, they could not sell because we had developed products in India for Indian use. And those same products, as I said, with some other features, could also sell very well in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa in competition with the best. So this spirit, हम करेंगे और करके दिखाएंगे, दुनिया को दिखाएंगे, पर हम आप करेंगे. So I was happy to hear from Ravi when he talked about Danfoss, that, building in India, research in India, Danfoss encouraging this, let Indians do it, produce things, and Danfoss will benefit from it, because we are part of, in that case, the Danfoss global system. Let's take pride in ourselves and let's learn to do things that we haven't learned to do well enough yet. Okay.
Great, sir. Anyway, everybody asked a question. Pankaj, Ravi, anything? Pankaj, you would like to go with the question? No. Ravi, do you have a question?
So I have a question. Firstly, very, very inspiring thoughts, and all the 5 pillars that you prescribed was quite inspirational. I think for enterprises, what is your recipe? I mean, how do you put purpose before profits? The biggest challenge today is, most enterprises are looking at profits, but what kind of recipes do you prescribe in a new world that they should put more focus on the purpose, the larger purpose, not just the purpose of being as a company, but, the larger purpose? And how do you actually motivate, or how does governments and, stakeholders motivate all to go in that direction? Something needs to change dramatically.
Yes. Every religion says that to be a selfish person and not to care for others is wrong. It's unethical. Every religion, whether it be Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, respect for others and not just looking after yourself. That is an ethical principle everywhere. So if you are a person who just looks after only himself and say that is the best way to be, you are an unethical person. But imagine that in economics, starting with Adam Smith, perhaps, who said that if everyone rationally has self-interest, looks after them rationally with self-interest, somehow by an invisible hand, the whole world will be all right. What we are observing is, unfortunately, not so. This rational self-interest principle doesn't make the world all right for everybody, nor is nature looked after. In business, it went much further by Milton Friedman, saying the purpose of business must be only business. Please just look after yourself. That is, in fact, the economist saying a few months ago, that the ethical thing for business is to just look after its shareholders. And this is a way of thinking. And you say, which world are you living in? And I'm saying on the ethical reasons, that is wrong. If you're very smart, please use your smartness for the care of others. As Gandhiji said, I have no problem with wealth. Please, if you know how to use resources efficiently and thus generate more wealth, please do so. The world needs that. We need to use resources efficiently, but the wealth that is created out of it, don't think it is yours. It belongs to the whole of society again. So trusteeship was his model. Now, therefore, the leaders of our businesses, the CEOs of our business must start by asking themselves an ethical question. And they will come to a challenge that they will say, and this is to Peter's question, why is it GRI and these reporting initiatives aren't being adopted? I found this, that they say, I believe in these good things, but my board and my shareholders and the stock market wants me to perform that way. In fact, it's my legal responsibility to do that. I'll be sued if I didn't take the interest of the shareholders above everything else, right? It's bad governance, we call it. In corporate governance, if you looked after other people's interests, you should be looking after your shareholders' interests and be accountable to them. So there's some fundamental things, and therefore we have to be business people, change the way we think and engage with government people and civil society, but government also, and tell government, please don't celebrate us for being creators of large companies. Yes. Put out a reporting system by which you can compare us against each other if we really are looking after society as a whole. And in India, we did create, many years ago, the National Voluntary Guidelines, which was created by business leaders and by business associations. And again, the German associations helped us a lot with it. It was in the German Development Organization helped us with it. And we didn't adopt it. It is creeping in, yes. The stock market does require some companies, the large companies, to do it. But who knows about it even? Is it what you read in the papers every day? No. What we read in the papers every day is, how someone's wealth went up by that much, and we have those on the pages of our front newspapers every day. What are we celebrating? So unless we celebrate goodness and not size and wealth, we will not change.
Great insight, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very insightful.
There's a question come from Akshaya, something similar to that. They say the political system today are exploiting our natural resources and becoming personal gain wealthy. As a citizen, we are helpless. So what we can do about that?
Good question. For the last 2 years, 3 years, we've been celebrating that India's rising up this scale of ease of doing business, so many ranks, so many ranks, so many ranks. If you go back to the origin of this ease of doing business framework, the World Bank's ease of doing business framework, now I'm talking with insight, because when I was in the Planning Commission, the president of the World Bank appointed an independent commission chaired by the finance minister of South Africa, Trevor Manu, and with myself from India, someone from China, someone from Germany, and a few people to look at whether that framework was doing humanity much good. And we found that the measures that were being used there were make it easy for business to come into the country and for business to get going fast and to make money fast. So you're starting with that premise, you see. I want to make it easy for business to do business. And then you judge governments by how well they are doing with respect to making it easy for business to do business. We celebrate those governments that make it easy for business to do business. And India wants to climb up that ladder also. So come to the basic ethical point here. So right now there's a big, big move around the world, which is not within business and within government yet, but in civil society. Ease of living is what we must measure. The ease of living of citizens, not the ease of doing business of big business. And I'm saying big business again, because when you have a vendor, a street vendor, he's doing business, a street vendor, right? And it's so difficult for that person to do business because we say, oh, you're dirtying up the street, you're breaking the rules. We impose the rules of formality because we want to well, live in our good houses which we can afford and have clean streets when we step out. This person's trying to earn a living. He's not asking the state or me to pay him. He's saying, I'm doing something, I'm doing business. But you're making such rules, it's difficult for me to do business. And I can't live also. I mean, can't afford to live in a good house. You call it a slum and don't give it water and sanitation. And this, when the bus stopped, the COVID made our economy bus stop, these are the people who fell off. Their businesses collapsed, their lives collapsed. They had to leave whatever little houses they had because they can't keep physical distances inside those houses. This is the consequence of following the ease of doing business framework, which favors large formal businesses and their perspective. So change. So join the movement and say, let's think about citizens and the small entrepreneurs. Let's see how we can make life easy for them.
The question of the money content, sir. He says Indian Corona relief actions, relief package are appreciated. It took consideration of all except self-employed people in the country who also have no income. What's your view on developing a relief package for self-employed people in India?
Oh, there is so. What is, don't link human beings' needs to just employment. Human beings, when they lose employment, then they have the need for health, for example, even greater. Okay? So you look at human beings and citizens. Social security, universal social security, like Germany, Sweden, Denmark, the Northern European countries have very well, and the United States has to some degree also. Japan has a good way. Universal social security. You can't provide universal employment, but you should care for your citizens by providing universal social security. So anyone who's self-employed or not employed is entitled as a citizen to have that support from society. Good health, good public health, good education that is provided by the public systems. This is your right. This is social security. Learning new skills. This is my right. If you say the technology has changed and I don't have a job, then it's also your job as a technologist and as government to help me learn the new skills. So lifelong learning, once again, I keep coming back to Germany because there's so much to learn there. This whole system within Germany about apprenticeship, and even they've done during this COVID and the last financial crisis, no employers shed their employees totally because the state said, if you keep your people on part-time, we will provide you assistance to provide them training because they'll have time off during the part-time. Use them at work and then train them more so that when they come out of the crisis, your company will be even stronger. So it's not strange that after the last recession, German industry came out even stronger, whereas the UK and American industries came out weaker. Because during the pandemic, they let go the people who needed incomes and support the most, whereas German industry, with the support of government, was keeping the people on, building its own capacity and the people's capacity as they went further. So change your way of thinking, your relationship to citizens. Think about citizens first, and not companies and not employees only.
Yes, sir. We got another 10 minutes. I'll try and squeeze in as many questions as possible, sir, with your permission. And there's a question from Mr. Sridhar. You want to know, do you think the social enterprises will meet your expectations? And how do we create social purpose organizations, small scale ones, to last longer and forever and perform well? What's your tips to them?
You know, the new normal is emerging after COVID because we got all this time during these 4 months where we can think together. And right now in India, the last 4 months, it's so interesting how fast the concepts of social enterprises are developing. Now, the concepts of social enterprises come from both sides. We in the business world have been hearing of the concept of social enterprises from the investment world, impact investing. And businesses saying, I'm now creating a social enterprise, whereas previously it was a purely business enterprise. So you ask the business people, what's the difference between a purely business enterprise and the social enterprise? And they would say rightly that in the social enterprise, I'm wanting to see the benefits in terms of, like we said, care of the environment, measurable, care of people's lives and livelihoods, measurables, and not just the return on the investment. So I've got 3, the balanced scorecard. And this is what will make a social enterprise. It's using a balanced scorecard. Okay, so coming into that, fine. On the social side, from the social side, I'm saying it's a long ago idea. Mahatma Gandhi's idea, let's put it that way, having enterprises which are running themselves to produce incomes and jobs and wealth for people have been around that idea for a long time, except that we look down on it. This is not a good corporation. This is not listed on the stock exchange, you see. So then we convert that social enterprise. I've been trying to convert it into a pure business enterprise. So today in India, there's a discussion, a big committee on creating a social stock exchange. And it's interesting to see that discussion, and there are several webinars going on around that. The social stock exchange is saying, well, why do we need a social stock exchange? We already have a stock exchange. And it's coming to say, but on the social stock exchange, the people who participate there and asking for investments must be measured by different indicators. So when you're talking about, analysts who report stocks as they do on the normal stock exchange, they keep telling you these up and down, these graphs every day about the deltas and incomes and all the rest of it. They are going to be reporting against another set of scorecards. And therefore, whether you come into it from the social side, like there are enterprises who say, I do need some money for my cooperative from the stock markets, you will be reporting your performance on the other two measures, not the stock market measures, which you're doing very well on already. And say, therefore, you should be attractive to the stock market investors, provided the stock market investors don't only want return on their investment, right? So therefore, you're going to create a market in between for a social enterprise, more social enterprises.
So a question from Mr. Raghavan Iyer. He said, why we do consider Human Development Index when the GDP has not given equitable distribution of wealth, 0% of the people do not have a good economic living. So what is the way forward from this?
GDP has not given people.
Correct.
Yes. So this comes to, like I said, the scorecard. The scorecard. Now, you can't just impose a scorecard. The people who have to govern themselves must find it what they want to govern towards. That I want to be measuring us by this. So here, once again, I keep quoting German organizations because they do some great work. This is the Bertelsmann Foundation. They, a few years ago, said, let's look at which countries are doing the best in terms of all-round development, means environmental care, as well as inclusion of people in social, in economic progress. And then see, how did they do this? How do they do this? So you start very objectively like a scientist to say, if we took at some indicators about, as I said, the lack of damage or less damage to the environment, as well as more inclusion and growth, as well as economic growth, which countries stand out? And I told you about that. Actually, India and those came worst. So they weren't looking at India and how to do balanced development. But they looked at countries and they found Finland right on top, Bhutan, a small country, coming there, Costa Rica, another small country coming there, Sweden, Germany, and Denmark, fairly high on those indicators. And then they said, well, how do these countries do it? That's the more important question for management and governance. So how do they do this? And what they found was this, that there is a large public conversation about what do we care for in a society? What do we care for? And as Dr. Peter mentioned at the beginning, this is what the Germans already are asking about themselves. So that in the COVID, what are we recovering? And what are we, in our haste of crisis management, creating? So this must be a public conversation in which people can speak clearly about what they care about and what they don't like. What they care about and what they don't like. And they found that in these countries, like I mentioned Germany as an example, and Sweden also I got to see when I went in the planning commission, these are public conversations. They happen in these seminars, very much. They happen in coffee shops, they happen everywhere. People talk about what matters to them. And the job of people like us, I'm saying the Madras Management Association, who are able to convene and organize very effective public conversations, this must be the subject. What's the society we care about? What do we want to create as a society? Before we start talking about management techniques and methods, because those are just instruments. What are we going to use them for? Technology, this is a question someone asked earlier, let me answer it. Technology is just a technology. It's a method of doing things. The question is, what do you want to get done? What's the purpose of it? Nuclear technology can be used to destroy the world just as much as it could be used to create clean energy. abundant clean energy. Okay, electricity, when it was introduced, we had to pose regulations because electricity could inadvertently cause harm. Motor cars are very good for transporting people around, but they're so regulated as an industry, you need a license to drive a car. So when we introduce technology, we must look at the consequences of that technology on the world. And information technology, social media is causing today more harm to the quality of society than the good it potentially can create. And that's the big debate right now about regulation to go with that. So please, to you management people, talk about the purpose of management and the purpose of technology.
Point well taken, sir. I will combine the 2-3 questions together from Ms. Mallika, James, and what they want to ask is, we have all the resources in the country, but still we are way behind, not developing. But the gap between the haves and have not been widening, and the poor are becoming poor, the rich are becoming richer. Under these circumstances, do you think the new education policy will make an impact on the society and change?
You see, the question is in the two parts. The first part, I think I've answered, that we need to change
Yes.
The way we think of society and for whose benefit
Yes.
our ideas of technology or growth or development are. Change that. So with that, coming to the education policy. If I say, look, the purpose of education is to enable every child in this country to have an equal opportunity to make his or her own life a good life. Right. So then with that, I would say that the opportunity to learn technology, the opportunity to learn mathematics, the opportunity to learn science, the opportunity to learn English, if that is what's required to get on in the world and get yourself a job and good incomes, must be available equally to every child. Yes. Also, learning, it doesn't happen by just giving the curriculum and the books. The way, the atmosphere in the school, the number of children with a teacher in the school, that enables some children to learn faster. So therefore, if we want to have equality of opportunity, then we cannot be persisting with saying there will be some private schools which can afford to give very high-class technology and facilities, but you'll have to pay for it. And it's fair. I mean, you pay for what you get, or you get what you pay for. So some people, and they're doing anything illegal, they've got the money, they're buying what they want to buy. But then those people who don't have the money can't afford this. And this persists. And the people who get the better education are able to earn even more. And all the studies in the United States in the last 3-4 years are pointing this out. That actually, the good quality of education in the Ivy League schools of the United States and the private schools in the United States is creating further disparities between the generations. Yeah? Education is supposed to be a generational leveler. That I might be a poor person, but my child goes to the same school as your rich person. But if I can't send my child to the same school that the rich people children go to, then my generation is falling further and further behind. And so this applies to castes in our country also, because historically they've been disadvantaged. They've been given the most menial professions where they can hardly earn to do the dirtiest menial work, which the dirty work, doesn't require skill, so we pay you little. And so they can't afford to get private goods, whether it's health or education, if we make it private, by a good business principle that people must pay for what they get. Because business can't give them charity, right? So we come back to, if we have to change our society to make it more inclusive and to come out in a few years, the sooner we do it, the better off, the faster we'll do it, is we have to make public goods of high quality accessible to everybody. I'm putting it down, free of personal cost. It will have to be a social cost. And to pay that social cost, the government needs money too. But the rich people, if they say their heart is in the right place, they should at least be willing to pay taxes and higher taxes. Even with what they have left after paying the taxes, believe me, we can afford a lot inside that bus.
The question which has come relevant to what you just now spoke, sir, this come from Mr. Venkatesh Sheshadri. Is it why would an investor part with his hard-earned money if the company is not going to generate profits, pay dividend, and just spend on welfare measures for society? And he also want to know, every welfare country has huge individual taxes. be it Sweden, Norway, Denmark, where 65% of the is an average. Is India prepared for such high taxes?
I'm again asking the same wealthy people. You ask the question, why would an investor part with his money? It's your own question. I'm not going to answer it for you. You have to ask yourself the question. This I come back to the matter about ethics and religion. Were you born into this world to look after yourself and to make more for yourself? Or why did nature bring you into the world?
Super. What last question, sir? How and where all can government be save on the establishment expenses? What's your take on governance in the country in the last 25 years or so, or from the advent of economic reforms and IT revolutions?
Economic reforms has been very confused. We, 1991, we sort of threw out the baby with the bathwater. We had a very sclerotic, overly controlling bureaucratic system of trying to manage the economy. What came in 91 was government is bad. Let's have no government. Yes, because Donald Reagan and the Washington Consensus and fueled by Milton Friedman, and Donald Reagan said that government is never the solution, it's always the problem. And this became amongst our elite a thing said. And even now, in the last few weeks, and people are debating the new economic policy, you will please hear the same people in India, the elite thinkers of India, saying, when are we going to wake up and allow privatizing of education? Because only then will we have good education. Look, that's what I'm saying. There's an ideological bias here. The people are not applying their minds openly to reality, to looking at the system as a whole. So we must start to be good learners, to look around and look at things. So in economic reforms, we've come to the time where economics are having to re-examine economics. It's not been right. The whole system of managing a capitalist economy versus state economies is being up in the air. And we're concerned about going too far one way, but we shouldn't be too far the other way either. We've got to combine the necessities from both together. So India, we're going to have to be going through these discussions amongst us, the elite, open up our minds, have patient listening to each other. And in that patient listening, please put the poor people at the center. Let them say what matters to them, and let us then, the experts, think around and say, have we together been able to find a solution for that? And frankly, they might even have a better solution than we experts have for the problems that we are finding it so hard to tackle. So it's the way we learn together and work together that must change.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Great insight on COVID, the new normal, and the governance, and your insights on this theme, thought-provoking insights, which really kindle the thought process of many. From the way the comments have come, from the way the questions have come, we could say this is a subject which is concerning everybody, because the new normal, how the governance is going to take shape, and how the politicians are going to behave. And they're also thinking a lot of things that more young politicians will come into play, because old politicians will be very scared of COVID. There's so many things that are happening. And I think you have been so gracious enough to answer all the questions which you think we are just, even though we have crossed the laid on time by about 2-3 minutes. I think the audience really enjoyed. Thank you so much, all the participants who are watching the program live. More than 1,400 people from YouTube, Facebook, MMA radio, and some of your questions we couldn't take. We combined most of the questions, but you can watch the recording available with us next 1 year. You can log in any of our website or our social media. It's all available. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Peter Rimmel, for joining us from Germany. It's great, and you are setting the tone, really set the tone for the evening discussion. Thank you, Ravi, for joining and delivering the welcome address. Pankaj, thank you for joining from Delhi, and thanks for your support, which enabled us to bring in some outstanding speakers to come and speak in MMA. So I again remind you, the next speaker under the CM MMA Conrad Stifting Leader Speak Series is Mr. Gurumurthy, is going to keep coming and talk to us, and you can ask him a lot of questions. What's going to happen in the terms of governance, and in terms of how India is going to be behaving, and how the world is going to look post-COVID. So interesting sessions. Keep watching, keep learning. Thank you, each one of you. Thanks, Mr. Arun Maira. Really, indeed, grateful to you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in Chennai and MMA when you visit Chennai soon. I'm quite sure that will happen. As for the prediction of some of the people, by October, we should be opening up and people will start traveling. If that has happened, we're delighted to host you in Chennai for a conversation with a large number of people who are really keen to listen to you. Thank you so much, sir. And thanks to each one of you for joining this evening. Bye-bye. Stay safe, stay healthy. Till we meet again. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.